I'm so happy to be at the School of Informatics, Computing, and now Engineering. I never imagined that someday I would find myself as sort of in the middle of a school. I always imagined I'd be an outlier for my whole life, but as it turns out, I'm in a school of outliers, so it's possible. Thanks so much. It's really a pleasure and an honor to get a chance to represent the school at Research Horizons today. Thanks all for coming. So I would like to begin with a dream. This is the dream of perhaps this young woman who's playing the viola with the Auckland Symphony, but it's also the dream of many, many other people. I'll just sort of improvise a little bit. It goes something like this. She's practiced for many months, and she's imagining from the practice room that if she does really well, she will win the concerto competition for her local orchestra. And lo and behold, she does. And there she is, center stage. Her musical voice soars out over the orchestra, accompanied in every detail and nuance as if from a single mind. She sings her heart out. The applause is thunderous. The critics rave. Okay, there's the dream. I admit this was in part my dream at one time, so I feel okay saying this. I hate this dream. Not all of it, but a part of it. A big part of the dream to me seems to be about vanity. Center stage, adoring fans, raving critics. To me, this is not what the satisfying part of music making is about. It's something that is much more personal than that. So what is the satisfying part of music? Well, I suppose it's different things for different people, but I imagine that it is being focused in the moment when you're making music, not looking backward toward what perhaps didn't go right or forward toward what you fear, but being immersed in the moment, telling a musical story, singing. And to really get this experience, it is sort of hard to do by yourself. The typical pieces that feature a musical instrument are not just for that instrument. They're for this and orchestra or band or accompanying ensemble. And it's more than we can really do to imagine all of these things. So I hope that we will have a way of making all of these other parts happen for us, and a way that they will happen bending to our wills, following us. So I guess there's another part of the dream that I don't like so much. Maybe it's not the dream itself. So she practices so hard to be the soloist with her local orchestra, and she won. But what about all the others? They were worthy too, maybe not as much as she was. They would have benefited from this experience very much too. So I believe everybody ought to get to be the soloist. I suppose this is almost a little bit oxymoronic in a way. I mean, it takes one person by definition to be the soloist and 40 to be the orchestra. So of course, this can't really happen, or can happen at best rarely for the overwhelming majority of musicians. Well, maybe. That's the magic of the School of Informatics. What I hope is to find a way so that everybody gets this experience. So you can think of this perhaps as a championing of those who are a little bit less good. Okay, so here is my dream, which is an answer to the original dream. This is a long standing dream, and you can tell if you look at the picture. To give you an idea about how long this has been going on, this was drawn by my older daughter when she was about 5 years old. She's going to graduate from college in a couple weeks, so it has been a while. So what my dream is here is I would like to take the original experience that I described. I want to strip away all the vanity, the raving critics, the thunderous applause, the adoring fans. We're getting rid of that, and I want to focus on the essential musical part here. It is about making music in your own way. It is about being supported by an ensemble that bends to your will. So I want to take this experience, and I hope that somehow I will package it up, put it in a box, which will of course be a computer, and deliver it to the doorstep of anybody who would like this experience. So said a little bit more plainly, I would like to create a computer program. The program will listen to people. It will have an ability to hear. It will be able to follow a player. It will perhaps even be able to learn from them as they play together, so it gets better. So in doing so, it provides the experience that I envisioned with everything else that needs to be there. All the harmony, all the texture, all the sonority, all of the parts need to be there to make this happen. So this is my dream. Well, how does it work? I think of myself as a scientist, so I won't feel completely good about myself if I don't say a little bit about how this happens. There are two parts that I'll talk about today. To hear a player, of course, to follow a player, of course, we have to be able to hear them. Somehow, there has to be some machine version of the listening process. So this is something like machine vision, but for listening. So I need to be able to hear the player, and having done that, I need to be able to take some action that is based on what I heard, the planning problem. So let me show you a little bit about how this looks. So I'm going to play some audio for you in a second. I guess the thing I should say is one thing that makes this problem possible is we have the benefit of knowing the score. The computer knows what the notes the soloist is going to play, knows what the rhythms are. So we are not trying to recognize blindly here. I'm using this information essentially to try and create a match between the score and the audio that I get. So to give you a feeling for how this works, I'm going to play some of this audio. This is a Chinese violinist I met a couple months ago on the Brahms concerto, just her. And I'll let it play for a second, but after I do that, I'm going to bring up the score. And to sort of elucidate the listening process, you will see the current position highlighted in the score. So you'll see her progress advancing as the audio goes on. And after you get a second to appreciate that, I'm going to give a version of this where there are plucks that are played, pitch plucks associated with each of the note. It's to give you a sense of how accurate it is. I don't really want to throw numbers at people, but here's an experiential sense of how accurate the recognition is. Okay, so it's not really, well, it's not really the focus of what I want to talk about today, just as a little aside. I think this has really interesting possibilities for music education. Oh, there are many conversations between teacher and student where the teacher makes a charge or a criticism which perhaps is not really believed by the student. I'm a scientist. I believe in data. I like the idea that you can say, well, you know, in measure 20, I think that your 120, your pitch was not really right. And we'll just look at it right there. We can, you know, sort of have this random access to any point in the score. Okay, so there's listening. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that having solved the listening problem, you're there. You've done what you need to do. Here's the problem with that. You folks are good listeners. You listen better than a computer would, probably much better. Let's imagine, we'll see if we can put your good listening to use. You will be the orchestra and I will be the soloist. And our parts are so easy here. I have one note, da, that's my note. You also have one note. Your note is da. The complication is these go together. When I do mine, you're supposed to do yours. You're good listeners, so this should be fine. Are you ready? You're early. Okay. Da. Okay. Ah, okay. Well, clearly it's impossible. There's no way that you can build a reflexive accompaniment system. There's no way you can respond that quickly. The computer's response is not so different from yours, actually. So the good news is that's not a very realistic scenario. Let me make it a little bit more realistic. Okay, my part now is going to be da-da-da-da. And we meet there at the last note, the point of coincidence. Okay, so are you folks ready? Da-da-da-da. It was okay, let's try again. Da-da-da-da. Oh, okay, much, much better. Okay. So let's try this one more time. You ready? Da-da-da-da. Ah, tutti bravi, beautiful. Okay, you folks are so smart. You did so much in that short amount of time. I never told you that you needed some sort of model to do this, some sort of model for musical time, and somehow you figured that out on your own. And not only that, there's this latent variable in the model, tempo. I didn't say anything about that. What you folks did, by the time I got to the second note, you know, oh, something's wrong. You hadn't figured out what's going on by then, but you knew something was wrong at least. That's progress. By the time I get to the third note, 3 evenly spaced notes, it's the same thing before, but it's just slower. So you readjusted your prediction of the point of coincidence and you, well, some of you anyway, so you got there beautifully. So that is so smart. And the thing that I love so much about it, this is exactly what the accompaniment system needs to do. We need to make math out of that. For the math aficionados, it's something very much like the Kalman filter. But the idea is exactly what you just did, put into science. So here is a favorite quote of mine. This is Yogi Berra, who says, well, the whole thing clearly is about making predictions. Coordinating parts is about making predictions. And Yogi Berra tells us, among his many witty sayings, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. Prediction is always hard, but prediction is the heart of what needs to happen in order to coordinate parts. So I would like to show you a video here that demonstrates this in a way that I think it makes it easy to assimilate what the important things are. This is Maria Sanderson. She was, I believe, 13 when we did this. She plays the violin beautifully. She's at IU now, doing terrifically well. In the image at the top, there are these 3 colors that you need to pay attention to, red, green, and blue. So blue is the easiest. Blue will be now. It's just going to move across at a steady rate, showing you where we are in the audio. The green are the note detection. So we're going to hear notes that the soloist is playing. And every time the computer hears a note, it's going to pop up one of these green markers. And if you watch and listen carefully, you'll notice they're always a little bit behind real time. You need to hear a note a little bit before you can detect that it sounds. That's the problem that we had in coordinating. So watch carefully, you see they lag just a little bit behind. The most important part, though, is the red marks. This is what the accompaniment is doing. This is the prediction process that I'm describing. So all of these red marks here that are to the left of the blue line, that's all in the past. That's spilt milk, so we're not going to worry about them. You know, in some cases, you know, this event was supposed to coordinate with that one. We probably did a good job there. So same thing here. These were probably supposed to be together. They were a little bit off in reality. These things happen. So what you should focus on is the red line that is to the right of the blue line. That's the future accompaniment note, the pending note. This is what the accompaniment system focuses all of its energy on. So think of it as the scheduling mechanism. It gets scheduled, and then as new information comes in, that is, as we detect more solo notes, it's tweaked, and you'll see it sort of jiggles and jiggles as we assimilate this new information until finally the blue line crosses it, it recedes into the past, we're on to a new problem. No use crying over spilt milk, always focusing on the future. Okay. I would like to talk now a little bit about the work that I've been doing for a number of years, almost a decade now, with the Summer String Academy. So this is a program that's led by Mimi Zweig. She's in the upper right there. She watches over us literally and figuratively, like she does in the picture here. The Summer String Academy is this really wonderful group it's an international group of mostly high school students. They are musical, they are hardworking, they are smart, they are funny, they are soulful, they are a delight to work with. I have a real good time doing this. Every year we do a concert. So we practice for, say, a week, maybe an hour and a half with each student. The most interesting part of the practice is sometimes the things that I do with the teachers. We do the concert because it's in the String Academy tradition. I like to say that it's an all rehearsal system and there are no concerts, but I've never been able to sell this to the String Academy. Everything is focused on concerts there. But I think some of the most productive time that we have is working individually with the teachers. The InfoPhil gives the teacher a chance to work with the student in the complete musical context on musical things, not on technical things, on interpretive things. So I think that's a wonderful opportunity. Anyway, the Summer String Academy has proved to be a wonderful and unusual testing ground for the InfoPhil. When I started doing this, I really had no idea what to expect, what kind of reception we would get. On one hand, you know, we come in to music a tradition-bound. Classical music is a tradition-bound domain, and we come in with our extension cords and our computers and our audio equipment. And one wonders if this is seen as sort of an unwelcome intrusion into a sacred space. Perhaps some do see it that way. But the good news is the students are young and flexible, and they're all married to their phones. So there's just no way that they can completely close their mind to the possibility of technology affecting their life in a positive way, maybe even their musical life. So I think what's happened after some time, the response from the students, especially the students who play with the system, has just been overwhelmingly positive. They like it a lot. It's fun for them. It's instructive for them. I think probably the best way I can convey the place that this has come to take is through this video that I'm going to show you, which makes both an obvious and surprising point. So here, this is Sarah Ma. She was 15 when we did this. This is the last minute or so of the Saint-Saëns introduction in Rondo Capriccioso. This is a showpiece for the violin. Many students in the String Academy have a bout with this at one time or another. I'll just play the last minute or so and discuss. So part of the point is the applause. They're clapping for Sarah. It is not for the Informatics Philharmonic. It is not for me. I imagine it probably hasn't even occurred to anybody there that this might be hard to do. This is the thing that I'm most proud of. For people who do human-robot interaction, one of the goals, this is a robot, really. One of the goals is that the robot should not be controlling the conversation, forcing people to follow its agenda. It needs to blend into the world of the humans and to support their agenda. So that we seem to fit into this situation somewhat unnoticed is an indication that, at least to some extent, we succeeded in doing that. And I'm very pleased with that. Okay. The question that you probably now have all been wondering, how can I break your system? And to help me answer this question, I would like to introduce Brenda Brenner. So Brenda Brenner is a faculty member in the Jacobs School. She is the chair of music education, and she is the president of ASTA, the American String Teachers Association. And more important than all of this, she's the teacher of my daughter. And for this, I will always be grateful. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is perhaps a little bit, oh, well, I guess you can move the music, is perhaps a little bit silly, but it makes an important point. Let's see. So we are going to choose a section of this piece, a short section, and I am giving Brenda sort of an unusual instruction here. She is supposed to play like a madwoman. To be able to follow a soloist in the wild requires that you can deal with unexpected situations. So this is not typically what happens in a real musical situation. There are different hard problems, but just to demonstrate robustness, I'm going to let Brenda play a couple measures and do her worst. No, from B. Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's all we're doing. Oh, oh, I'm sorry, I stopped at the wrong place. Okay, great. So I just have to get this out because people always ask this. So now that's out of the way. The real reason she's here is I want to do a concert involving a couple players. So what is going to happen now is Brenda is going to play the entire third movement of this piece, or almost all of it. We'll start a little bit before her entrance. And the hope is that you can just enjoy the music. Let's see. Okay. Thanks so much, Brenda. Okay, so we have another piece coming, another treat. This is a favorite of mine. We have Samantha Johnson-Helms. Oh, great, there you are. She's going to play the Debussy Premier Rhapsody for clarinet. And sometimes it's done with orchestra, but in this case we're doing it with piano. This is a favorite piece of mine. I sort of latched onto this piece maybe when I was 15 or 16 or something like that, at a period when I was just inhaling music. Somehow it penetrated deeply, and it is dear to me. Let's see. wrong ending place. Sorry. Let's see. Let's see. Let's go from the Les Doubles Plus Vite. Okay, wonderful. All of this managed to take more time than I ever imagined, and I think I'm nearly out of time now. So I will just sort of wrap up a little bit. Oh, maybe I don't have time to do this because I want to have a little time for questions, but one of the things that I try most on now, having worked on this so hard for so many years, of course, I hope that it will go out into the world and be used by people. Not necessarily that it brings accolades to me, but I want people to use it because it's fun to use and it's valuable to use. So we're doing a lot of things to try and make this happen. I think I'm going to skip discussing these right now because it's probably about time to wrap up. Oh, there's been a number of things in the popular press about this in recent years. Most recently, there's this Nuacom competition from Dartmouth. They call them the Turing tests in the creative arts. They had various categories: dance, accompaniment, poetry. I don't know what this really means, but we were deemed to be the only system in any category to have satisfied the Turing test. Not that anybody really cares so much about the Turing test anymore, but still it happened. And I would like to thank many people who have been involved in this, especially the student collaborators that I've worked with over recent years, and thanks to the NSF for funding research that is scientific research but is about music. Bravo, NSF, for making that connection. And thanks to all of you too. So at this point, I'd like to open things up for questions if there are any.
When are you going to make the karaoke version of this?
By the karaoke version, you mean the version for a singer?
I know. I mean the version for the non-singer.
Right, okay. The singing is interesting. Singing poses some challenges that instruments don't. There are a couple things. The voice spends a lot of time between notes, and it's a fair thing to say in general that the voice is just less accurate than the instruments, but also there's some things that'll help us about the voice. There's diction, there are all these things that happen with the words that should help. It actually turns out it's a little bit easier to follow an untrained singer who has an okay sense of pitch, who can carry a tune, of course, than perhaps an opera singer with lots of vibrato. That's a harder problem. So this is one of the problems that I didn't have time to talk about all the ongoing problems that are super interesting, but you hit it on the head. This is one of them.
Chester. So this is really cool, and I love the way you're thinking about this, obviously. And for example, like have you thought about taking other bands' information, for coming back in after a fermata, for example, like if it was a quartet? I think there's just need the smallest of cues, and you kind of all know when to come in at the same time. Whereas audio, prediction-wise, I imagine it'd be a harder problem. Have you thought about using other bands' information, like
well,
motion?
It's interesting that you bring that up. The first thing I have to say is this situation happened numerous times in both pieces. So you probably saw 15 examples of situations where the computer is waiting for the appropriate pitch from the player and then comes in. And most of the time, it doesn't really turn out to be a big problem. So yes, the orchestra or whatever the accompanying ensemble is will be late in that case. I wouldn't say it's sort of the thing that dominates most of my attention in thinking about, what is the one thing that would really improve this that much. But yeah, I like the idea of using some sort of gestural information, either from vision or from an accelerometer. I guess I also think it is an awful lot of work for perhaps limited marginal gain. I don't know if there's a big win to be had there. So the cue thing that you mentioned, yeah, this is the obvious thing. Otherwise, people do all sorts of things with their body that may be even more confusing than helpful in trying to follow pulse or rhythm, which is what we're interested in doing. But I still think it's a great idea. Maybe I haven't found the right way to do it or right way to think of it. Yeah.
I mean, if people are working on, like, for example, like different phrasing might lead to different gestures. Of course, as you said, extremely individualized to the performer. But it seems like per performer, there may be like consistent ways to capture something about their gesture so that can be used, not even just beyond the kind of mechanical that's come in at the right time,
Yeah.
but the kind of overall, even something about the musicality of the system in accordance with kind of what they're doing at a musical level. I wonder if just, or other non-gesture, either non-audio, non-gesture. Just curious.
Yeah, these are good ideas. You bring up the subject of musicality, which is sort of one of the most interesting issues to think about and try to explore and get better at. The InfoPhil has a really simple-minded view of musicality. It's all about imitation. So the idea is that the live player, presumably they're musical and they know more than the accompanist knows. So if we can just copy what they do, if we can get with them, the hope is to absorb a certain amount of musicality. So this is the simple-minded way to go at that, but you propose something that is much more sophisticated and very interesting. How does one translate, these subtle movements that we make with the body that communicate so effectively to people, but are super hard to interpret? I mean, for instance, one of the things that I've looked at is conducting. And one of the things that I observe about conducting, and I think it's probably the same for, following physical movement, is how much musical sophistication is required to interpret the movement correctly. You just sort of need to know a lot about context and intent and understanding, the meaning of the music, whatever that means. And it is the problem of trying to identify points in time from a trace like this is a difficult context-dependent one. And the other thing, you just sort of you hit the nail on the head about the user-specific nature of training data. One of the things that we found is it's just not particularly useful to train on one player and then go to another. You may learn some, gross aspects of the piece, but almost, so for instance, for the last piece that we did, there was a good amount of training, of learning through rehearsal and adapting. So this is something that just has to be done for the particular player, and done for another player, it's rather useless. So I guess that means I'm done now. So, okay.
Let's reconvene at 4 sharp for the Renaissance Engineer panel. And let's thank Raphael and the soloist.